Hi there and welcome along to another episode of A Serve of Leadership. My name is Ian Crawford. I'm a professional speaker, coach and trainer specialising in the area of leadership and influence. Joining me again this week, like every week, is the very popular Ash Dashludi, leadership coach and consultant. Welcome back, Ash. Great to see you.
Of course, not sure where you're extracting that popular piece from, but that's very kind of you. How are you, mate?
Your mum told me to say that. I'm doing well, buddy. Yourself?
What's been going on in your week?
Just a little bit of work, a bit of exercise. It's been some okay weather here, so I've been trying to get outside as much as possibly can. What about yourself?
Again, yeah, a lot of good stuff on the cards. Trying to come up with a new app to be able to better engage and support leaders on their journey. That's what I'm doing this week.
Just this week? Is that all it's going to take?
Well, as I said, when I'm doing work with my team, I say to them, look, I'll come up with the idea and you guys just make stuff happen. So I've done my bit now. I've come up with the idea. I just need them to deliver now.
And you've given them a week to do an app. All right, excellent.
Well, I figured I'd give them a bit of breathing space.
Yeah, give them 2 days leeway. So tell us, what are we talking about today?
Well, I thought actually a really good topic this week would be something that probably falls within your slot, the idea of actually how do we become an influential leader. I know it's raised a lot with conversations that I have with people, and that it's not just their ability to be able to, have authority over people, but how can they actually get much better at influencing? What do you reckon?
Well, funny enough, I like that topic.
I thought you might.
Yeah, so this is obviously a 3-part series webinar that we'll be doing around that topic because this is my thing and I really enjoy talking about it. So should we get into it?
Mate, away you go. Well, being your topic, you should really kick us off.
Wow, there you go. So the first one is to be, for leaders, is to be mindful of how you leave people's feelings about them. So what I mean by that is a lot of leaders are rushing around day in, day out, and they're brushing past people to get to meetings and tasks and things like that. One of the things we have to be very, very careful of is, well, what opinion are our members, our team members, having of us as we rush? And a lot of the leadership books call that the leadership shadow. So when you leave the room, what is the perception of you as a leader? Now, that doesn't necessarily mean, they adore you and love you and all that stuff, but, levels of respect and trust and those things that leaders need to have in place to ensure that they're effective and efficient in building their team is a really important one. And I'm sure people are thinking that, well, that's pretty straightforward, but a lot of leaders get so caught up in the delivery of tasks and activities and KPIs that they really forget about building those situations where people have those positive opinions of the leader rather than just someone who can get stuff done. And the leader is fully responsible for that occurring. And I see it regularly, and I'm guessing you probably do as well, where leaders are rushing down corridors. And because they're thinking about the next meeting, they're not trying to be mean. They're not trying to be disregarding of their people, because they're thinking so deeply about the next meeting or where they have to be. People go, hey, hi, leader, and they totally ignore them. Now, those really small things add up, and they really add an impact on how people perceive them. And in this day and age, and people that are coming into the workplace now, those little interactions are going to become more and more important. So those leaders have to start being very, very aware of them. And that's
let's say turn that into a bit of a practical sense. What would you normally suggest to people that you're working with and how they could actually do that?
Well, firstly, that awareness thing is that they are constantly on display, leaders, and the higher you're up, the more constant you're on display. And just ensure that if you are walking around other people, that you say good morning and how you doing and respond to their good mornings and things like that. Instead of having, really small things, like instead of having lunch in your office, go and have it in the lunchroom with them, with groups of people, because not only will that impact the people that you're sitting with, but also the people around you that are seeing them. It's about having conversations with people more than just, hey, did you hit the KPI today? Did you do this task? Why haven't you done this task? It's more about how's the family, how's the friends. Now, there's a fine line between that and thinking that we all have to be bosom buddies, friends, having barbecues and beers at each other's house. That's not what I'm talking about. It's about treating each other like people rather than just robots that are there to deliver tasks. And as much as we wish that would occur, I think that's one of the biggest things that are lacking in the leadership world is building relationships with your team around people rather than practice.
Interesting. It ties back into, I think, some of the conversations we were having last week around being really clear about what's important. And, sometimes we do talk about the performance and the connection of our team being really important, but whether we actually create the time to invest into that sometimes doesn't always align with that priority.
What you said there is such a common thing in the workplace. From the lowest level, beginning leaders, all the way through the highest levels. We'll get it one day, and we'll get it because our people will just continue to leave our business.
Yep.
And eventually we'll wake up just going, well, I'm missing this. It's having a massive impact, negative impact on the business. I need to change.
Yeah.
So, all right, enough of me. Your turn.
Well, look, mine's actually probably an extension of yours. Mine would be, often I talk to people around this idea of investing in relationships, right? So really what that is understanding the networks and the individuals around you. So whether they be part of your team, whether they be key stakeholders, whether they are peers, and investing in that time almost before before the requirement of influence is in place. Right? So that idea of being able to deepen those connections and to formulate relationships actually becomes a powerful tool down the track. Right? And I think a lot of that comes from what you were talking about, is that idea about we tend to be influenced more by people that we trust. And so as a leader, you need to be looking at what are these ingredients that help around the trust component. And we know that what they call intimacy or relationship is one of those critical ingredients. So it's not just the credibility that you hold and what you can talk about. It's not just the reliability, so that ability to be able to execute what you talk about, but that idea about the intimacy or that relationship is a really important piece and can smoothen things, or at least accelerate things, I should say, when the time comes that you actually really do want to try and influence over decision-making, direction, engagement and things like that. So that would be my first one, investing in relationships.
And do you see many leaders in your world doing that? Have you got
I see many of the good ones doing it, yes, absolutely. So the ones who stand out, and as you said, it doesn't have to be, that I'm sitting down with you all day and, and just listening to your story, but it can just be being deeply mindful in the moment, understanding what it is the other person is looking for and connecting with them on that, and then heading off.
Yeah, nice.
So absolutely, the good ones too, no question.
And it's just so obvious so quickly when you meet them, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And when you walk around with them, it's just so obvious. So, all right, shall I go
number
with
two?
Number two for me, it's a pretty simple one, pretty straightforward. Be authentic. And this links on to our last time
You say simple, mate, but there is so much layer to this concept of being authentic.
Oh, how hard could it be?
I'm intrigued to see how you are going to go with this, because this is a tricky one.
I heard this on a really good podcast that I was listening, not quite as good as this one, but a really good podcast. I think they have 6 million listeners a week, those people. So it's just about the same as us.
Yeah.
I think we have
3. Yeah.
We do it because we're authentic. Is that, based on what you just said then, is it's simple, but it's not easy. So being authentic is being yourself. And what I tend to find with the leaders that I work with, some of them, especially at the beginning of their career, they try to be all things to everyone, or they try to be the leader that they think everyone wants them to be, rather than just being, hey, this is the leader I want to be, and I'm going to build my team around that.
Yeah.
And it comes back to what we were discussing before about having that real clarity and actually sitting down and spending some time thinking about, what sort of leader do I want to be that serves my people, that drives the business, but more importantly, aligns with the values that I have? And once people do that, then that they could be authentic because they don't have to be something else. They just be who they are. Now, are they going to annoy some people? Absolutely. Are people going to love them? Some people are going to hate them? Yes. But guess what? That's just normal world. So why not be in a place that you can maintain it? And the reason I say that beginning leaders aren't great at this, but it tends to be much better at the other end, is because those leaders who aren't authentic and try to be something else that they're really not get beaten up, metaphorically, through their career by being that person that's happy sometimes and 12 seconds later is really angry, and because they're not being true to themselves. And part of that being authentic as well is not being Superman and being perfect at everything you do. And one of the things that people as an example, people in our career tend to do when they first begin is they give stories about how everyone's great and they did this really well and this is excellent. And very early in my career, I remember someone in my class, one of my groups, putting their hand up and going, Cross, you've done some really cool stuff. Your people that you work with have done some really cool stuff. Can you tell us about when they screwed up and how they dealt with that? I think that was a massive learning for me as a facilitator, but also from a leadership point of view, it's okay to be wrong sometimes, and you don't have to hide behind that being perfect all the time. If you're wrong, I'm wrong. Let's fix it. Let's move on. And having those conversations and being authentic around that situation is okay. I think it builds you in your status as a leader, builds trust, definitely. And it makes people not only aware that you're not thinking you're perfect, that you are perfect, but more importantly, you've just given permission for people within your team to have conversations about where they struggle and where they've made a mistake. So there's it's a ripple effect type one for me. And I think it's really important.
Important but challenging.
It is. And I'm not sure if this is getting easier or harder for the young leaders, because our world of social media is the complete opposite to authentic most of the time. Some of the biggest hitters within the social media world aren't authentic about their whole career and what they look like. That's not authentic. They may be great people, but it sends a very different message than what we're probably trying to say right here.
Very crafted. They're very crafted and shaped.
Well, yeah, a reflection of a perfect world, which we know it isn't. So, all right, mate, enough of me. Your turn.
Well, my number two, I guess, is a little bit more practical. So when I look at the really good influential leaders, they have an ability to communicate on a number of levels, or to be able to use, multiple tools in their toolkit. And what I mean by that is that, often when you look at how people train or how people try and influence others, it often uses the style that best resonates with them. So there is actually a wonderful little article written by the consulting group, the Boston Consulting Group, and they talk about this approach of head, heart, and hands. Right? And what I like about that is it actually is that reminder around that really good influential leaders have the ability to engage across multiple formats that resonate or provide the best opportunity to resonate with all of the team, not just with an individual, or not just from the perspective that best resonates with the leader. So for argument's sake, one of the things around, say, the head approach is, yes, absolutely have a real clarity of strategy and a real clarity around the reasoning why we're doing things, and is often very data-driven in its piece, right? Hugely valuable, but may not get everyone on board. So the good leaders also understand how to leverage the heart side of things. So tapping into, similar to what you mentioned before, what is most important for people? What aligns with the values of an individual? What, using almost that Whiffam principle, what is actually important for me, or what is my why? And being able to talk through that side of things from an individual's perspective. And then, of course, there's the hand side of things. So some people you can talk till the cows come home, but unless they're engaged in the process, unless they're part of that that journey, then it never becomes real for them in that side, So I think being able to use those different tools at various times through a journey as a leader can really help that influencing piece. But maybe tapping back into what you were talking about, the authenticity side of things, is being authentic yourself actually provide you a better frame of mind to be looking out for what may resonate best with others, because you're not just worrying about what's the best way for me to say this. You actually, your bit is already covered. So you're already starting to think about, well, how can I best tell the story or influence them based on what is most important to them? And it could be any one of all three, or potentially utilizing all three from an organizational level.
And if you're really clear on that authentic, the messaging and using the 3 points that you highlighted just comes. But if you just try to use the 3 tools without being aligned with your authentic self, then sometimes it really goes all over the place. So
yeah, well, especially when you try and use one of the modes that doesn't really resonate with someone.
Yeah.
The number of times that I've seen, data just kind of dumped onto people and going, this is why it's really important. Here's how it makes sense. And people go, yeah, I don't get it.
Dots and dashes. Yeah. Yeah, this is an incredibly important part. This is an incredible foundational part of any leadership, but also in regards to being an influential leader, is about possessing high levels of self-control. Great leaders are emotionally intelligent and they're calm under pressure. No ifs or buts. And those sort of leaders that are calm under pressure, they don't see any point in overreacting or allowing their emotions to actually dictate their words and their actions. And so they're very poised under pressure. And once again, sounds really easy, doesn't it? But incredibly difficult, because it takes time for you to get there. This is a learnt skill in my mind. And as you get better as a leader, and trust me, as a leadership around this type of stuff, you're going to screw up at some stage, and you're going to screw up big. We're just trying to reduce the number of times and how big, because it's a learnt behavior. So the fundamental part of having self-control is self-awareness about your triggers in regards to what makes you angry or sad or happy or annoyed or frustrated, and being able to manage those triggers. And so the leaders that I've seen, I've been in the presence of people walking into their office and saying some amazing things about accidents that have happened and equipment that's been trashed. And these leaders don't underestimate the importance of responding, but they're very, very thoughtful around how they respond, because, blowing up and throwing papers off your desk doesn't send the right message. And it also goes back to all that authentic self type stuff. And, we've mentioned this on previous podcasts, and we've talked about, one of my favorite sayings. It's the only the quote that I've got on my wall in front of me here is, the person in the room with the greatest behavioral flexibility controls the room. And that's what I mean, is the leader needs to be the one in control, the Zen master, when things around them are happening. So that would be my final tip.
And what's a way that you help people develop that skill?
Well, one of the latest and greatest things that works really well is mindfulness activities. Prior to work, start of work, during the day. And we're talking about, maybe between 2 minutes and 10 minutes of effort. And I won't go any deeper than that, because you Google mindful activities, on Google, there's 6 million options for you. But I will add that it's not an hour's worth of meditating or humming or whatever you like. It can be that, if that's what you're into, but it also can be a lot simpler and quicker on the move that you can do. And, something that we're starting to see out of some really high achieving individuals in the business world at the moment is, and I read it the other day, about 87% have some sort of mindfulness activity in the morning. So that's the first one. And mindfulness basically just gives us that 100th of a second, 1,000th of a second between trigger and response. And for that really incredibly small bit of time in between those two things is a lifetime for the human brain. The ability to calculate how you're going to respond. The second thing is, like I've already said, is to learn from our mistakes. So if you and I have a conversation and I blow up or I don't respond the way I want to, there's literally nothing I can do about it in that point. I can go and apologize and I can try and build the relationship back up again. But for my learnings, I would go away and reflect on that conversation but I wouldn't reflect on how bad I did. The reflection that I would have is, how would I do that differently next time?
Mm-hmm.
And really practice in my head a few times about how I would respond to you, what I would say differently. You know, would I use heart words, or would I use those head words and things like that?
Yeah.
And the reason I get people to do that, and if they do it deeply enough, the brain can't tell the difference between stuff that happens in the real world and stuff that I imagine. So if I go away and visualize this stuff and I imagine it, next time that situation that I just experienced with you occurs, then I'll go to the direction I want rather than the explosive direction. And like I said, through your career, you're going to really screw up on this sort of stuff. But guess what? Learn from it, move on. We've all been there.
Okay.
That help?
Good tips.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think there's some good tips in there.
Maybe I should do this as a job.
Wow, you know, you don't want to you don't want to give away rubbish collecting just yet. Okay, well, look, let me close out with my number 3 then. And look, I think actually it's probably a bit of an extension of yours. I call it beware of blind spots. Right? And so with beware of blind spots is that it's actually understanding that not only ourselves, but those around us are going to have particular biases that we are contending with. And those biases can happen actually at an individual level, and they can also happen at a team level in themselves. So, you know, one of the examples is that, you know, often if people do struggle, or if a lot of people don't like change necessarily, and I guess the impact that change can have, and inherently some of those biases will start to come out in their conversation behaviours and the approaches of things. And just as similar, you need to be mindful yourself of maybe some of the biases that will drip into the way that you interact in those situations where you're trying to be influential. And one of them that I see quite common is what I call the data dump. So if I tie back into that second tip, is that, you know, sometimes, you know, we think that we can sort of wander into the room and we just dump a whole pile of data onto another group or another team, and then just assume that, hey, I've given you all that information now, so you should understand what's going on, and in fact you should be on board with where things are at, rather than sometimes that data dump can actually just swallow up a team or an individual and not allow them to actually progress along the journey that you're wanting to take them on. I've even seen it happen at more sort of that team level perspective where, you know, we're trying to make sure that we engage, you know, bring people along for the journey, but we leave out a particular team or a particular key stakeholder.
Yeah.
You know, and then suddenly, you know, a lot of the work that we're trying to do in the room gets eroded by the fact that we haven't engaged properly in that process, you know, because of, well, I like to think that a lot of it is unconscious. Sometimes it is intentional in that piece, but we need to be really mindful of these blind spots and ensure that we're taking the time to be having regular check-ins and regular reflective periods with those around us to know that, hey, even though we're seeing things one way, we're driving things one way, we have an idea of where it's going, put ourselves in the other person's shoes and going, okay, what could be driving some of their resistance, you know, and they may not even necessarily be aware of it themselves.
So how do we identify blind spots as a leader? What's some strategies that we can put in place?
Yep, really good question. So it ties back into whether you do it system based by a system. So, for example, if we have meetings along the way, we're having these conversations, we can actually embed systems into the meetings to ensure that we have these checkpoints along the way to see where everyone's sitting on the journey, right? Rather than just assuming it. I think tying back into some of the things that you spoke about previously about having that that sort of sense of self-awareness, if you can actually develop your self-awareness and empathy drives, then you will be more mindful of where other people are sitting and will look out for the behaviours that may demonstrate that. So there's, you know, a number of different ways that you can do it. Sometimes system-driven, sometimes behavioural-driven on that side.
And I would suggest it's a lifelong journey.
As leadership is. Absolutely.
It really is. So.
It is. Well, and because, you know, leadership's about people and people is a lifelong journey.
100%. Absolutely. Good point to finish off on. Anything else you'd like to add?
I think I'm done. I'm feeling fatigued.
You need some mindfulness work. Is that what you're telling me? All right, Ash and I will be back next week to discuss all things leadership. If you missed out on any previous episodes, just click on the link below now. And that'll take you to the YouTube channel where you'll be able to catch up on all the episodes and gather some really great content to help your leadership development. If you have a topic or question that you would like answered, please send it to the details below. We would love to hear from you, and we will definitely respond to anything that comes in. Thank you very much, Ash.
Mate, thanks as always for your wisdom, Croft.
And you too, mate. We look forward to seeing you next week. And I look forward to seeing all of you next week. Thanks for joining us.